Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called I Became the Mother of the Bloody Male Lead. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! The moment the lady awakes, the news spreads like wildfire throughout the mansion. Without delay, the maids check on her condition, and the other servants are promptly informed. Initially, she is bewildered, finding herself in unfamiliar surroundings with a maid addressing her as lady right after she wakes up. With that, a whirlwind of thoughts overwhelms her, throwing her into an existential crisis. Suddenly, unfamiliar memories flood her mind, leaving her disoriented and unable to regain her senses. Before she has the chance to rest, the master unexpectedly arrives in her room. He initially expects her to scream and throw things upon seeing him. However, to his surprise, she remains calm despite the sudden appearance of the imposing figure in front of her, clueless about his existence. Soon after, the maid informs him that his wife has recently had an accident and needs more rest. Before leaving, as per request by the maid, he tells his wife that he will be away from the mansion for some time, suspecting she's only pretending as if she's falling. This interaction finally confirms to the lady that the master is indeed her husband, and it becomes apparent that their relationship is strained. She then quickly gets up and checks herself in the mirror. When she sees her reflection, she is met with the sight of silver hair cascading to her waist and a pair of bright eyes. Shortly after, her name flashes in her mind. Sheriel Loperam is renowned as the greatest beauty of the Empire and the Duchess of the Noble Duchy of Loperam. She plays the role of a neglectful mother to the young male lead in the empowering romantic fantasy novel, Torn Wings. Upon this realization, it dawns on her that she embodies a character from the novel she was reading. In the original work, there was not a single bit of information about the male lead's mother, causing her to feel anxious. Trying to calm herself, she resolves to embrace her new reality and continue living as Sheriel. However, another revelation strikes her. The original male lead had a disturbing obsession and even killed the secondary character. This makes her fear that he might target her as well. Oh my gosh, no one is safe from that child. Sheriel then concludes that not only does she have a strained relationship with her husband, but her son is also an obsessed psychopath with the female lead in the future. If she wants to survive without dying, she must first establish a harmonious relationship with her son and husband before it's too late. The dilemma lies in deciding whom to reconcile with first, her troublesome husband or the child she has neglected for years. Speaking of the child, Sheriel notices him outside the window looking utterly adorable. His cuteness is completely different from the cruel representation in the novel. Who would have thought that this child might be a future psychopath? He's just too cute for the role. The next day, she wakes up feeling a lot better than before. As Daisy serves her breakfast in bed, she reminds her not to worry about the mansion issues and to simply focus on her recovery. When Sheriel asks about Cardicel, her son, she confirms that her relationship with both him and her husband is worse than she anticipated. However, she can't sit still and let it go on like this. In the original story, her son could not empathize with other people's emotions at all. She plans to approach him first, but she's a little worried. Soon after, she requests Daisy to guide her to the garden, where Cardicel is. Later on, Sheriel spots him eating in the garden while hiding behind the bushes. Not long after, he notices someone snooping on him, so she has no choice but to come out to meet him. As expected, he remains cold towards her. What's more, he attempts to walk away after she invites herself to join him for tea. She tries to stop him as she requests some time to be given as his mother, leaving him momentarily speechless. After a moment of silence, Cardicel rejects Sheriel's request to spend time together, stating that he doesn't need a mother. Without delay, he turns and runs off, only to trip and fall to the ground. She rushes towards him immediately, but he stubbornly refuses her help despite his bleeding knee. He pushes her away as he continues to run off. Later that night, the memory of her son falling is still lingering in her mind. Moreover, Sheriel is concerned that Cardicel seems to hate her more than she thought, which is a big problem. He's probably surprised and confused by his mother's sudden change of heart. She resolves to find a way to get closer to him more slowly. She then writes a letter for her son and orders Daisy to deliver it to him. A few days later, when Cardicel wakes up, he finds a large gift box beside him. He has gotten tired of receiving useless things from his mother. However, this time, he gets a teddy bear with a letter. Previously, Sheriel said he was annoying, but now she's treating him nicely, which he finds unusual. Soon after he finishes reading the letter, his guard enters his room to help him prepare for the day. As usual, the guard intends to throw the gift, but Cardicel decides to keep the toy instead. Although he throws away all the other presents, he keeps all the letters. The guard assumes he likes the toy, but Cardicel quickly becomes defensive, denying any interest in his mother's gifts. Shortly, he requests something before the guard leaves. The following day, Sheriel let out a scream of joy upon receiving a letter from her son. Daisy, after hearing her name called in excitement, congratulates her. However, as soon as she opens the letter, her expression quickly turns gloomy. It turns out that Cardicel doesn't like her giving him gifts or letters anymore. As expected, it is too much at this time, but still, she is happy that she received a response from him for the first time. Anyway, she is also surprised by his beautiful handwriting, despite being so young. His reaction is understandable since it's the first time that Sheriel has shown interest in him. While pouring tea, Daisy comments that it is her first time seeing the Duchess smile ever since. To be fair, everyone in the mansion had a grim expression as if they feared that something bad could happen. She plans to ask more about the dukedom, but shortly remembers that she needs to focus on her son. Sheriel contemplates whether to see Cardicel in person, worried that he might get hurt because of her again. Recently, he's been going to the garden earlier than usual. I think apologizing is the first step to building a good relationship. Surprisingly, this prompts her to visit him that very day. After Daisy helps her get ready, they head to the garden. As Sheriel makes her way to see Cardicel, she begins to doubt whether it's a good idea and worries about what to say. Shortly, she finally spots him in his usual spot. Upon seeing Cardicel in his usual spot in the garden, Sheriel carefully approaches him. Looking at his wound, he applied the medicine she gave to it, which made her happy. When she arrives, she finds him already in the garden, with the dessert before him untouched. She then assumes that he has been waiting for her, however, he denies it quickly. Momentarily, Sheriel asks if they can sit together, but he refuses. Understandably, Cardicel remains cautious around her. In the end, she stands nearby, silently watching him as he eats. A week later, she receives numerous invitation letters from various people, despite not being active in social circles. In response, she sends a formal apology to each, since there's no need for her to attend social events at the moment. Her main priority is building a good relationship with her son. While waiting for Sheriel to finish, Daisy points out her diary, assuming that it's a notebook of observations of the people who dislike her. Truthfully, she's only taken notes on Cardicel's cuteness. Afterward, she proceeds to write in her diary again about how cute her son is. In that case, she should show it to him and take advantage of this opportunity for them to become closer. Later that day, Sheriel heads to Cardicel's room nervously. After gathering some courage, she finally knocks on his door and calms herself down. As soon as he opens the door, she hands him a candy bear. My gosh, how come there is so much adorableness in this child? It's her first time inside his room, which looks quite different from what she expected. Shortly after, she shows him her diary and asks him to read it. Upon reading it, Cardicel suddenly starts burning. Sheriel thinks it's Duke Loperon's skill in the novel, in which only the one who inherited it could become the heir of the family. She's impressed that her son can now use it, even though her diary has been burned. She braces herself for any negative reaction. If he says he doesn't like it, she won't write about it again. But to Sheriel's surprise, Cardicel is only concerned about his name. He seems to like being called Cardel by his mother. As she remembers the fate of her son in the future, she is determined to take on the role of his mother properly. She doesn't want to see how he harms other people, especially the female lead. If Cardel is loved enough and learns how to love, his future must also change. With this in mind, Sheriel asks him to give her 10 minutes of his time every day. Indeed, she needs to teach him about love properly. Sheriel's sudden kindness towards Cardicel is unexpected. When she requests 10 minutes of his time each day, he first asks for the reason behind it. Admittedly, she wants to teach him something important, how to treat others with respect and how to care for and love others, because she realizes that no one else has taught him these lessons. Eventually, he agrees with his mother's request. The next day in the garden, while Sheriel is watching her son eat a cake, she can't help but think about his future, wherein he hurts other people despite being such a lovely child. As no one has ever consoled him, he probably doesn't know how to give and receive love correctly. Thus, she is determined to raise Cardicel properly so that he won't grow like the original. Sheriel then starts by asking him what he would do if he received a precious bird. Truthfully, he plans to make a nice bird cage to keep it from flying away, which is the exact opposite of her perspective on letting the bird rest comfortably. Oh no, I'm honestly scared for that child's future. Despite her efforts, she can't shake the feeling that the male lead's sinister tendencies might surface. She then suggests they read a book together next time, a proposal he surprisingly likes. Later that day, Sheriel is preoccupied with thoughts on how to properly educate her son, realizing that his state of mind is more challenging than she initially perceived. After a few moments of Daisy calling her, she finally snaps out of her thoughts. She assumes that the Duchess is concerned about the Master's imminent return. In fact, she hadn't been aware of it until now. The sudden shift to a serious demeanor makes her speculate that the lady still feels uneasy around the Duke. Sheriel is actually trying to find a strategy to bring her son closer to his father. Raising children is something a couple does together, so she takes the Master's return as an opportunity to talk naturally and become friends. Upon noticing her concern for the Master, Daisy attempts to persuade Sheriel to consider welcoming the Master when he returns in 2 days. As she thinks about the marital discord being fatal to the emotions of a child, she accepts Daisy's proposal. She then orders to inform the Duke's servants as she plans to give a grand welcome to the Duke, who will soon return. Before continuing to finish organizing the documents, she suddenly finds herself pondering her husband's name. On the day of the Master's return, as he makes his way back to the mansion, he contemplates not coming back, assuming that his wife is not there. However, upon arrival, he is greeted by servants welcoming him. Shortly, Sheriel approaches him, stating that she's been awaiting his return. Based on the Duke's reaction, someone is clearly enchanted by dear Sheriel's beauty. But my god, he is handsome as well! Surprisingly, Sheriel's sudden change of heart makes the Duke think that he's hallucinating. Shortly, she suggests going inside the mansion together, however, he is still suspicious about her. After she reassures him that her intentions are pure, he concludes that the accident probably changed her. Momentarily, they make their way to the dining room alone after the servants leave them as per request. Despite the reassurance, the Duke remains cautious around Sheriel. Meanwhile, all she feels is excitement to show him what she has prepared for him and to talk about their relationship. As he silently eats half of his meal, she starts to feel suffocated by the silence. Unable to miss this opportunity, she takes the initiative and starts the conversation. Meanwhile, he tries to understand why she's suddenly being kind, given how much he knows she despises him. Shortly, Sheriel breaks the silence by asking about his expedition. He responds coldly, noting that she's saying things she normally wouldn't, implying she would usually prefer if the Duke got hurt instead. Anticipating his reaction, she takes a moment to calm herself. Then, she shifts the conversation to discuss their son and his education. However, the Duke finds it amusing that she now wants to raise their son together, given that she previously expressed her hatred for him. Oh, now I see how terrible the old Sheriel is! Indeed, she has gotten strange after the accident. Soon after, Sheriel approaches him, assuring him that she's perfectly fine. Despite her efforts, the Duke remains convinced that she is merely putting on an act. This reminds her of the first time she approached Cardicel nicely. She simply wants to resolve their issues through a proper conversation, but he seems pretty upset, which truly hurts her. Soon after, he starts to leave, but Sheriel follows him, nearly stumbling to the ground. Fortunately, the Duke swiftly catches her in his arms. She seizes the moment to suggest they work together for the sake of their son. However, before she can finish, she starts to lose consciousness. Later that night, Sheriel wakes up in her bed to find the Duke by her side, asking her why she fainted. She explains that anyone would faint if faced with his intimidating expression and silence during dinner. She then asks him if he despises her so much. In response, he calmly points out that she hated him first, remembering how she used to yell at him and throw pillows whenever he tried to get closer. He suggests that her current behavior resembles that of someone who has forgotten everything. Well, to be fair, she didn't apologize yet. The Duke massages her cold hand gently as he speaks, willing to endure the discomfort just to stay like this for a while. Anyway, the resident doctor of the mansion will arrive soon to check on Sheriel. Speaking of the doctor, he finally arrives. He proceeds to examine her immediately, so the conversation between her and the Duke remains unfinished. The next day, Sheriel doesn't feel well. She wants to make a harmonious family for Cardicel, but she's failing at it. She thinks of another way to get closer to her husband aside from a private dinner, which is a failure. Shortly after, she hears a knock on her door. Getting out of bed, she goes to see who it is, having instructed Daisy not to let anyone in. To her surprise, it's Cardicel standing there with a candy bear in hand for her. In her heart, she rejoices with happiness because her son visited her, a gesture that reassures her of his care and concern. She then expresses gratitude for thinking of her. Reluctant to show any affection, he defensively explains that he only came because the maid told him his mother had fainted. Despite his reservations, Sheriel still wants to express her gratitude to him as she pats his head. He is so adorable! I can just hide him in my pockets! Cardicel tells her not to touch him like that next time, but deep inside, he's not used to her thanking him. In addition, he reminds her not to eat with the Duke if she's tired enough to pass out. Sheriel then asks if he's concerned, but he quickly denies it. The truth is, she is attempting to foster a good relationship with the Duke for the sake of Cardicel, as he is his father. The thought of his father being more important than him upsets him, and he tries to walk away. Before he can leave, Sheriel stops him, assuring him that he is the most important person to her. More than anyone else, the time she spends with Cardi is the most cherished and valuable to her. Soon after, he hugs her for the first time, which takes her by surprise. OMG, he's finally starting to show affection! After Cardicel hugs Sheriel, he tells her to go back to bed and get some rest. In addition, she must eat the candy bear for her to have pleasant dreams. A few days later, feeling much better with Daisy's assistance, Sheriel prepares something special for her son that she made herself, hoping he will like it. Upon arriving at the garden, Cardicel is already waiting for her at his usual spot. She thanks him for keeping his promise to spend time with her. As Daisy sets up the food, she explains that she brought it to share a meal with him. He tries to hide his excitement from his mother upon seeing the errata walnuts. Waiting anxiously for his reaction, Sheriel is stunned when Cardicel bluntly comments that it tastes awful after eating it with his bare hands. She immediately apologizes for it since it's her first time making it. As soon as he knows that his mother made it on her own, he eats the whole thing quickly. He explains that it tastes better the more he continues to eat it. Look at him trying to protect his mom's feelings. Later that day, Sheriel feels fulfilled after her son treats her nicely. Now, she heads towards the Duke's office as she needs to get closer to him for the sake of their lovely child. Aw, they're slowly getting closer. Upon her arrival, she is greeted by Kiet Velmore, the Duke of Loperum's aide. He dismisses her request for a moment of his time, citing his busy schedule. Kietville attempts to excuse herself to leave the couple alone, but the Duke refuses to allow it. It becomes apparent that he's neglecting his wife in favor of his work. In an effort to change the atmosphere, Sheriel invites him for a walk together in the garden, but he coldly declines once more, insisting that she leave immediately. That leaves her no choice but to try and come back in the morning again. The following day, she thinks of a storybook to read to Cardicel in the garden today. Momentarily, Daisy arrives in her office to deliver a letter from Marquisa Penzel. It turns out that Sheriel mistakenly sent out the wrong letter of approval for an invitation. Now, she looks like she's prioritizing other children's birthdays over her own, which concerns her deeply. Uh-oh, looks like this one's gonna be a big problem. While sitting in her office, Sheriel worries that Marquise de Penzel's party will be in 2 days. Looking at the invitation, Sheriel suddenly thinks the name feels familiar, thus making her remember Radius Penzel. Radius is the supporting protagonist who Cardicel will kill in the future, making her worry. Sheriel then decides that she will not let Cardicel kill Radius Penzel in the future, and also decides that she will raise Cardicel properly. Thus, she announces to the maid that she will see Cardicel. Meanwhile, the Duke is working in his office, hoping that the Duchess will visit him. While working, the Duke's butler cannot help but voice out that it is almost time for Sheriel to visit the Duke, also adding that he cannot believe that the Duke is always coming to see her every day. The Duke then seriously asks his butler if he is not busy, since his butler is very chatty today, which makes him stop his teasing with the Duke. While working, the Duke suddenly realizes that after the carriage incident, Sheriel suddenly changed a lot, and the Duke feels suspicious that Sheriel is not looking for the Duke these days. The Duke remembers that in the past, Sheriel was always angry and did not even look at the Duke anymore. In the past, Sheriel was always cold and would never smile at him. This makes the Duke suspicious since Sheriel suddenly treats him warmly. The Duke notices that Sheriel smiles at him frequently and will always make time to join the Duke in his work. The Duke then thinks to himself if Sheriel will visit him today. The Duke is becoming impatient and realizes that Sheriel may not visit him today. Thus, the Duke decides and announces to his butler that he will take a walk since being stuck in the office is frustrating. Hearing the Duke's plan, his butler worriedly tells him that the Duke has a lot of documents to read. But the Duke just replies to his butler that it is also his butler's job to help him with his paperwork. When the Duke starts to walk out of the office door, his butler teasingly tells the Duke that he can find his wife in the garden since Sheriel often loves to stay there. Hearing this, the Duke tries to deny to his butler by telling his butler that the butler is speaking nonsense and that if the Duke and Sheriel are going to meet each other, then it is by chance. While walking in the corridor, the Duke hears Sheriel trying to convince their son to join her at the party of the Penzels. The Duke overhears Cardicel asking Sheriel to pick how much she loves more between Cardicel and the Duke. Sheriel tells Cardicel that she loves Cardicel more than the Duke. Hearing this, the Duke feels disappointed. Sheriel tries to pacify Cardicel by telling Cardicel that she wants him to join her at the birthday party of Marquis Punzel's son. Hearing this, Cardicel starts to cry and tells Sheriel that he feels jealous since she never celebrates his birthday. Suddenly, Sheriel is having a flashback on how badly the original Sheriel treated Cardicel, and she feels sorry for him since it is too much to take for a child. Poor baby is so traumatized. Seeing Cardicel crying so much, Sheriel feels her heart breaking for the child and wishes she could return time to comfort him and greet Cardicel on his birthday. Sheriel then hugs Cardicel and tells him that she's sorry. Cardicel is shocked by Sheriel's action but still remains in Sheriel's arms, while they shout that Cardicel hates Sheriel. While still hugging and comforting Cardicel, Sheriel again tells him that she is sorry for leaving him alone, and Sheriel promises Cardicel that it will not happen in the future. After pacifying Cardicel, Sheriel asks him if he wants to have a grand birthday banquet for his birthday. But Cardicel flatly tells Sheriel that he is not fond of crowds. Sheriel then asks Cardicel what he wants, to which Cardicel shyly answers that he just wants to be greeted by Sheriel. This child is purely innocent. Hearing this, Sheriel then promises to Cardicel that she will do her best to prepare for his birthday. But Cardicel sadly tells Sheriel that it's too late, since he wants to be greeted first before the other kids. Seeing how pure Cardicel is, Sheriel tells him that they will have a celebration party in Cardicel's favorite garden, thus making him happy. Meanwhile, the Duke mentally notes what will happen tomorrow after eavesdropping on Sheriel and Cardicel's conversation. The next day, while the Duke is walking in the garden, he sees Sheriel and Cardicel together with the servants, having a celebration. While they are celebrating, Sheriel feels a strange gaze, thus making her look towards the direction where the Duke is. Sheriel then walks towards the Duke. The Duke then asks Sheriel what funny hat she is wearing and pretends not to know what's going on by asking Sheriel what the commotion is about. Hearing this, Sheriel annoyingly informs the Duke that she tried hard to make the hat and tells the Duke that they're having Cardicel's birthday party with servants since Cardicel hates crowds. Hearing this, the Duke seriously confronts Sheriel by asking her why she's doing things she did not do before, and that in the past, Sheriel only asked the servants to take care of Cardicel. Sheriel replies to the Duke that Cardicel is so cute and pretty, and she then asks the Duke if he wants to raise Cardicel together. The Duke then asks Sheriel why she is now always calling their son Cardicel by his nickname, when Sheriel only calls him Duke, not his name. The Duke then curiously asks Sheriel if she knows the Duke's name. Hearing this, Sheriel is shocked and tense since she has forgotten the name of the Duke. He is so jealous. I bet both the father and son will fight for Sheriel's attention. Hearing the Duke's request, Sheriel then calls the Duke cutely as Kian. The Duke is shocked after realizing that Sheriel is affectionately calling him by his nickname. Meanwhile, Sheriel nervously looks at Kian's reaction since Sheriel only remembers the Duke's nickname. Sheriel then asks the Duke if he dislikes being called by his nickname. The Duke replies to Sheriel that she can call him whatever she wants, and quickly informs Sheriel that he needs to go to be able to hide his flustered face. While Sheriel is looking at the Duke walking away, Cardicel approaches Sheriel and asks what the Duke and Sheriel are talking about. Looking at Cardicel, Sheriel then thinks that he wants the Duke to attend the party, thus making Sheriel lie to Cardicel that the Duke also wants to wish him a happy birthday. Not minding what Sheriel is saying about the Duke, Cardicel pulls Sheriel back to the table full of cake and pastries, and cutely asks Sheriel to greet him again. Looking at his pure and cute face, Sheriel greets Cardicel again and promises him that today's party is for the past birthday party, and that the next birthday party will be celebrated with more joy. Cardicel notices tears in Sheriel's eyes, thus making him ask why she's crying. Sheriel tells Cardicel that she is fine and that they are just tears of happiness. Cardicel then shares his sweets with Sheriel while cutely telling her that eating sweets makes a person feel better. Ugh, this kid is purely innocent and sweet. Meanwhile, the servants cannot help but feel happy after witnessing such a beautiful moment. A few days later, while in her office, Sheriel remembers Cardicel's jealousy since Sheriel visited the Duke. Cardicel tells Sheriel that she did not keep her promise to him, that Sheriel would see him first, then the Duke. Also, Sheriel remembers that the Duke tells her that he may not have much time, but the Duke does not mind spending time with Sheriel and asks her if she will meet him first. Remembering what Cardicel and the Duke want, Sheriel feels frustrated since Cardicel and the Duke wish to spend time with her, but she cannot spend time with the both of them at the same time, but in different places. Gentlemen, would you kindly give the lady some slack? Looking at Sheriel's face, the maid suggests a solution for her, which makes Sheriel's face shine brightly. After hearing the maid's plan, the three of them, Cardicel, Sheriel, and the Duke, are in the Duke's office. Noticing that the atmosphere feels awkward and silent, Sheriel thinks about how her plan ended in this kind of situation because it seems a pretty perfect plan when she planned it with the maid. To lift the atmosphere up, Sheriel tries to call Cardicel, but both the Duke and Cardicel answer to Sheriel, leaving her in an awkward situation. Sheriel then clarifies that she did not call the Duke by formally calling him Duke, which the Duke corrects Sheriel since he wants to be called Kian by her and not the Duke. Sheriel then lovingly tells Kian that she called Cardicel, which makes Kian feel jealous and Cardicel happy. Sheriel notices Kian's sour expression but does not focus on it. Instead, Sheriel reminds Cardicel about the party they will attend in a few days. After reminding Cardicel, Sheriel then makes him promise to get along with the birthday boy since the boy is also about Cardicel's age. Hearing this, Cardicel pouts while asking if they really need to get along with the birthday boy. Sheriel acts disappointed and asks Cardicel if he remembers what she taught him. Seeing Sheriel's expression, Cardicel informs her that he still remembers it, and then begins to narrate how Sheriel taught him that when he meets a friend, he should not ignore them just because he does not like them. Sheriel then smiles and praises Cardicel. Both Cardicel and Sheriel then pinky promise. While Sheriel is praising Cardicel, papers are thrown by Kian, thus making Sheriel approach Kian and concerningly ask him if she needs to call a doctor. Kian then holds Sheriel's hand and tells her that there's no need for her to call the doctor. Kian then proceeds to ask her if Cardicel, his son, is really that good. Oh boy, this Duke is really jealous of the attention his son is getting from Sheriel. Hearing what Kian asks, Sheriel then tells him that Cardicel is indeed good, since Cardicel is their son. And Cardicel approaches them and again tells Kian that he is good. Seeing this moment, Sheriel finds it cute but decides not to voice it out since she knows Kian and Cardicel will fuss about it. Sheriel invites Kian to sit with them and enjoy the tea, which the Duke agrees with her. The day of the birthday party arrives, and as Sheriel and Cardicel make their way to their carriage, they also see that Kian is about to go somewhere, but in reality, Kian wants to see them, and he is just lying about his meetings. Sheriel then suggests to Kian that he can ride with them, but Cardicel strongly objects to this. That's your father, not a stranger. Don't be jealous, kid. While Cardicel is not happy with the idea of Kian joining them in the carriage, Sheriel suddenly realizes that it will be uncomfortable for Kian since the prepared carriage is small. Thus, Kian suggests that he and Sheriel ride it together, which makes Cardicel glare at Kian and therefore both having a staring contest. Looking at Kian and Cardicel, Sheriel suddenly realizes that maybe Kian wants to get to know Cardicel, which makes him want to ride with them. Sheriel then suggests to both Kian and Cardicel that she will ride in a different carriage so that both Kian and Cardicel can stay together. After hearing Sheriel's suggestion, Cardicel quickly rides the carriage and announces he will ride alone. At the same time, Kian announces that he needs to do something while walking away from Sheriel. While they're riding in the carriage, Sheriel notices that Cardicel still feels mad, so she tries to lift Cardicel's mood by telling him that the party will have lots of cakes and sweet pastries. Hearing about the food, Cardicel's mood instantly lights up. As they arrive at the Punzel mansion, Cardicel escorts Sheriel as she walks down the carriage. Cardicel really is a sweet boy. A butler then guides them to the garden where the party is held. Upon arriving at the garden, Mrs. Penzel welcomes Sheriel and Cardicel warmly, and tells Sheriel that she is happy and thankful that she accepted her invitation. Sheriel then formally introduces Cardicel to Mrs. Penzel by describing Cardicel as a kind and lovely child. Sheriel also happily tells Mrs. Penzel that she would love to meet the son of Marquise Penzel too. Mrs. Penzel then happily tells Sheriel that they place a screen so their guests at the party can see the lovely images of Roddy that they have captured so far. Hearing what Mrs. Penzel did, Sheriel also wants to do it with Cardicel, but her idea is stopped by Cardicel making a fire beside Sheriel as a sign that he doesn't like the idea. After parting ways with Cardicel, since the kids and grown-ups are at different tables, Sheriel is having tea with the rest of the mothers. While Mrs. Penzel announces that Sheriel arrived, a snobbish look eats Sheriel from head to toe, saying it is her first time seeing Sheriel in person. While the mothers are having tea, the snobbish lady, Mrs. Serthi, announces that she wants to ask a question. Mrs. Certi then tells them she brought in a costly dog. She then tells the other mothers that something about the dog makes it difficult for them to listen to their owner. After voicing her question, Mrs. Certi asks Sheriel what her view is about her new dog. This catches Sheriel off guard since her topic feels slightly out of the blue. Sheriel then tells Mrs. Certi that if she does not listen, it is better to train the dog calmly. But other mothers then question Sheriel by asking her why they need to train the dog when it is unnecessary to keep it. It doesn't listen to the owner, thus making it justifiable to throw the dog away. While the other mothers are talking about the dog, Sheriel then realizes that the dog they are talking about is Sheriel. Mrs. Certi then thanks Sheriel and adds that she doesn't know if she can train the dog because it is stupid. Hearing Mrs. Certi's slight insult about her, Sheriel just looks at Mrs. Certi but does not talk back at her. She proceeds to enjoy drinking her tea while also enjoying the pastries. Not done insulting Sheriel, Mrs. Certi again tells Sheriel that it looks like she's planning on inviting someone later to her mansion, and also voicing her concern about whether Duke Loperum will allow it. Sheriel then tells Mrs. Certi that the Duke will not allow it. Mrs. Certi does not back down and tries to insult Sheriel again by telling her that Sheriel needs to follow the Duke's instructions. Sheriel then shuts Mrs. Certi down by telling her that she worries too much about her and that Duke Loperum will not prevent Sheriel from inviting guests to the mansion. Mrs. Penzel then butts in with the conversation by telling everyone that she also raises a pretty pet parrot, and her pet parrot sometimes says things that she doesn't like, such as bad and disparaging words, and she cannot do anything since it's just a bird and not a person that she can cut off its tongue for speaking dirty words. Mrs. Penzel then adds that he knows he is playing with the knight of the family, but can't let him show his face everywhere while looking at Mrs. Certi. This action made the other mothers gossip about the rumors that Mrs. Certi was true. Hearing this, Mrs. Certi sourly announces that she will go check on her son while walking away from the table, thus also making other mothers leave the tea table after thanking Mrs. Penzel for the invitation. Meanwhile, Cardicel is sitting at the kids' table while eating the cakes. Young Penzel notices Cardicel and tells the other kids that he will stop playing for a bit while walking towards him. Cardicel notices the young Penzel, thus making him remember what his mother made him promise. Next, while Cardicel and young Penzel are arguing about which mother gives more love, the son of Mrs. Certi calls young Penzel. Mrs. Certi's son then tells him that he thought he abandoned them by hanging out with someone tremendous, and asks the young Penzel why he's playing with a boy like Cardicel, who is trash with blood mixed with barbarian blood. Hearing this, Cardicel scarily threatens Mrs. Certi's son by telling him that he needs to take responsibility for the words he says. Get him, little man! Show them a tiger cub is still a tiger! While glaring at Mrs. Certi's son, Cardicel remembers what the butler told him. Cardicel is the second most noble person after the royal family, and that Cardicel must learn appropriate etiquette that fits his position. Cardicel then mockingly tells Mrs. Certi's son that he still remembers the rumors well, and that Mrs. Certi's son never learns to be careful of what he says in front of the Duke's family. Young Penzel then asks Cardicel what he will do about it, which makes Mrs. Certi so scared. Cardicel then coolly tells young Penzel that it is a shame that he needs to mention his father's background, thus he will not do anything about it, and Cardicel also promises his mother that he will get along with the kids. Next, Mrs. Certi then calls her son, thus making her son run towards her while leaving Cardicel and young Penzel behind, and telling her about Cardicel's threat. Meanwhile, Sheriel and Mrs. Penzel are happily chatting. Sheriel falls dizzy, thus making Mrs. Penzel worry about her. Sheriel then recalls how her father sold her to Kian. Sheriel notices Mrs. Penzel's concerned face. She then assures her that she is fine and that she suddenly wants to see her child. Upon arriving at the kids' table, Sheriel is greeted by Cardicel's crying face. Seeing that Sheriel is present, Cardicel runs towards his mother and hugs her. Sheriel then looks at Mrs. Certi and demands an explanation. Seeing that Mrs. Certi is not planning on explaining, young Penzel then informs them about what really happened. Scared, Mrs. Certi pinches her child while shouting at him to apologize to Cardicel. Seeing that Mrs. Certi is about to hit her son, Sheriel shouts Mrs. Certi's name, thus making Mrs. Certi stop. Just when Lady Certi is about to hit her son, Sheriel yells at her to stop her. The lady then violently pulls her son forward, barking at him to apologize. With tears in his eyes, the child apologizes. The lady then approaches them and attempts to touch Cardicel, spouting her false apologies. Sheriel instantly prevents her from touching her son. She then declares that she will personally inform her husband about this incident. Seeing Lady Serti's son weeping softens her heart. She knows that the child is just excited, and this is not entirely his fault. She tells the lady that a child should not be treated so carelessly and that she will not forgive someone like her. She turns to leave Cardel in her arms. She has to tell Kian about this disrespect against their family. In the carriage, Sheriel apologizes to her son for what happened, so Cardel assures her that it's okay and then brags about what a good boy he was, not causing any fuss at all. He swears that he fulfilled his promise, so with a hesitant expression, he asks her not to leave him. No, poor child. No kid should ever worry about their parents leaving them. Sheriel hugs him tightly, promising that she'll never do that ever again. She knows that the child resents her for her past actions. What she doesn't understand is why the past Sheriel treated her child so coldly. Now, every time Cardicel acts indifferently towards her, she feels her heart breaking. It's as if he's actually her child and not just the male lead in a novel. She promises that she'll always be on his side from then on. Cardel then suddenly acts shyly, telling her once again that he kept his promise. Sheriel joyfully tells him that because he did as he had promised and acted very bravely earlier, she will grant him one wish. The little boy then asks his mom to read him a bedtime story later on. He mentions that Radius was bragging earlier that his mom often reads to him. Sheriel is glad that her son is making new friends. When they arrive home, Sheriel notes that summer is almost upon them, so she asks her son if he wants to go boating. She tells him that they can go on the trip with his dad. The moment Cardel hears that she plans to bring his dad along, he pouts, saying that it doesn't sound fun at all. Sheriel tells him that it will be fun if they all go, reminding the child that his dad loves him. Cardel reluctantly agrees, but not before making her promise not to leave him. Aw, this child is heartbreakingly cute. The lady then thanks her son, promising to work harder for him. Night falls, and Sheriel is deep in thought. She wants to know what Lady Serte was talking about earlier, calling Kian a barbarian and all. She wonders if the original Sheriel was forcibly married to Kian. She needs to remember her forgotten memory as soon as possible. That is when she decides to ask Daisy. When she asks the maid what it means to be a foreigner in this land, the maid is shocked enough to drop the tea set she's been holding. Daisy panics, apologizing if she did something to offend the madam. Sheriel instantly tells her that she did nothing wrong and explains the incident earlier. To ease her confusion, Sheriel confesses that after the carriage accident, she lost most of her memories. Daisy looks devastated, assuming that the only reason the lady is being nice to her own son is because of her memory loss. Sheriel is quick to deny this, for she genuinely loves Cardel. The child for her is the sweetest and kindest child there is. Daisy then tells her to hide her memory loss from the master, for it will break his heart if he learns that her kindness is because of this. When her memory returns, it will be difficult to deal with her cold attitude again. The lady is confused even more. She has assumed that the Duke hates her, but contrary to this, Daisy explains that the Duke wouldn't have spent so much of his fortune just to marry her. To save Sheriel's crumbling home, Kian proposed to her. The Duke was so sincere. What could have happened between these two? Sheriel is saddened to hear all of this. Daisy then informs her about Countess Serthe's matter. She tells her that the lady will surely be punished for insulting the dukedom's only heir. Sheriel asks the maid to inform her of any updates regarding the Countess. When she is left alone, Sheriel despairs. She wants to know what happened. Why did the past Sheriel hate the family that loves her? A week later, Daisy excitedly tells her that the Countess matter has been resolved. It is revealed that not only did she insult them, but she was also passing off an illegitimate child as a true-born son of the Count. Her punishment increases by tenfold, and she is now driven to the streets penniless. Later on, the Duchess finds her son sleeping in the library. The child is adorable as usual, so she instantly fusses over him. But then she realizes that he is burning up. She panics and bolts right up while carrying him. The unconscious Cardel is dreaming. He recalls in his dream how they are arguing about who is more loved by their moms. Radius was then bragging about how his mom would hold his hand whenever he was sick. Cardel's expression then turns sad because he has never been sick, so he's never experienced that. In his dreams, he swears to continue to be a good son. He wonders if his mom will continue to treat him kindly in the future, as long as he doesn't call her mom like a child. Oh no, Cardel, your mom has changed. Back in the library, Sheriel is still panicking that her son is in so much pain. They are in Cardel's room in no time, and the healer takes care of him. Sheriel learns that the pain Cardel is experiencing is due to his growth. His power is getting more intense, which is too much for this little body. The healer assures her that there's nothing to worry about since it's natural that he gets sick when his body can't withstand his growing strength. Sheriel insists on personally nursing her own son, so she refuses Daisy's offer to stay and watch over the young master. As night deepens, so does Cardel's pain. He is groaning in his sleep and crying due to the pain. Sheriel worries for him tremendously. All she can do is promise that she'll continue to be by his side. When the little boy opens his eyes, he calls out the word Mom. Sheriel is surprised, for this is the first time Cardel has ever called her mom. Cardel, on the other hand, is terrified and desperately apologizes for the way he addressed her. He swears not to do so ever again and begs his mother not to hate him. His reaction is breaking my heart. Sheriel, you must do all you can to make this cutie feel loved. Sheriel wraps him in a warm embrace and tells him that she's overjoyed that he called her mom. She doesn't want him to say that he'll stop acting like a child from then on. He can be silly all he wants. Hearing this makes Cardicel cry even more. He cries so much and his body starts aching even more. Sheriel lays him down once again so he can rest more. She tells him that once he's better, they can finally go boating like she has promised. The child then adorably requests that his mom read him a bedtime story. So with a fond smile on her face, she starts reading him a story. By the time the story ends, Cardel is already sound asleep. That's when Kian arrives, startling her when he suddenly speaks. Sheriel then teases the Duke if he is there because he's worried for his beloved son. Even though he tries to downplay it, she can tell that he really cares. She assures him that she'll be with their son all night. As usual, the Duke thinks she's planning something. He is still suspicious of her. She tries to deny it by saying she just changed, but he is not easily swayed, for he knows that Sheriel hates him and their son. Sheriel is then surprised when the Duke asks to hold her hand. When she agrees, he tells her how strange it is because she hates touching him. That is when he asks her if she somehow lost her memories after the accident. Sheriel is disappointed in herself because she failed to hide her condition well. She's afraid that the Duke will hurt, just as Daisy said. With melancholy clear in his eyes, Kian then tells her that if that hadn't happened between them, then she would have made him like this. He confesses that it breaks his heart to know that she doesn't hate him. To her surprise, he hugs her and tells her how much he likes seeing her smile so brightly. He likes it when she whispers softly in his ears. To him, everything about her is good. He is doing this now because he knows that once her memories return, he won't be able to come close to her again. He begs her to let him be selfish until then. This is literally breaking my heart. What could have ruined their sweet relationship when the Duke obviously loves her deeply? She tells him that he can do it as much as he wants. She holds his face gently and tells him that she knows that he's a sweet and kind person. The only reason he was so blunt with her is because he's afraid that she'll turn him away once her memories return. Sheriel then assures him that even if her memories return, she won't forget his warmth. Her words only make him sad, saying that if she keeps talking affectionately, then he'll miss her current self. She can't help but giggle at him, telling him how cute he is. She even pokes his cheeks while recalling how cold he was the last time they had dinner. Look at them being lovey-dovey. Please, please stay like this, you two. The Duke then confesses that he's been waiting for her smile all this time. She asks him if he still loves her. As if stating the most natural thing in the world, he tells her that he still loves her. Even with her cold treatment or harsh words, a single smile from her can melt his heart. Oh my gosh, we can only dream of such devotion. His words make her blush, and it intensifies even more when he leans down to kiss some strands of her hair. His handsomeness is too much for her. He cages her in his arms and teases her when she begins stuttering. When she can't take it anymore, she pushes him away. Pouting, she reminds him that he is there to visit their son. He tells her that he's worried for her as well. But she turned away, reminding him how he would turn his head away every time she visited. He teases her even more and explains that he likes her little visits, but he knows that she'll disappear from his sight anyway. Even at that moment, he is scared, afraid of the day she'll once again look at him with disgust. But even so, he knows that he'll regret it if he ever leaves her side, for he will always love her. Wah! Sheriel is too embarrassed to reply after hearing that confession. She has to calm down, so she tells Kian that he has to go back to his room. She will stay to watch over their son, but Kian insists that they watch over him together. At that moment, Cardel wakes up, complaining that he feels dizzy and might have a fever. His mom instantly fusses over him, placing a cold towel on his head. But then Cardel complains that his dad is being too noisy. Just another ploy to make his dad go away then. Kian tries to argue that he knows how to deal with this situation since he has been through it before due to his powers. But Cardel whines loudly that his dad is being too noisy. The Duke has to begrudgingly leave, and he can't believe that his heir is capable of such tricks. The next day, Sheriel is busy catching up on some work. She is obviously tired, so her maid begs her to take a rest since she took care of the young master all night. But Sheriel is determined to finish. She asks how Cardel is, so Daisy informs her that the boy is quite refreshed now and has great energy. Daisy assures the lady that they are taking good care of her son. Suddenly, there is a knock on the door, and Sheriel instantly becomes anxious. What if Kian has come to find her? She's incredibly embarrassed about what happened last night. Fortunately, the visitor turns out to be the adorable Cardel. Sheriel quickly goes over to him to check on his condition. She is worried that his body has not completely healed yet and he is wandering about. Her son assures her that he's all right now. He shyly confesses that he came because he felt empty without his mom. Isn't he the sweetest? Daisy and Sheriel are both overjoyed that the young master is opening his heart now. When Daisy leaves to get them some snacks, Cardel asks his mom if he can stay there while she's working. She can't believe how incredibly cute her son is. She warns him that her work is boring, and he quickly promises that he'll just rest quietly. The lady then makes a pinky promise to him that she'll read him a story once she's finished. It starts raining outside, and the Duchess notes that the rainy season is approaching. She has to move their boating trip earlier than expected. Cardel comments that the Duke might be too busy to come with them. At that moment, Kian arrives, commenting that something is going on behind his back. Well, Duke, your son is trying to exclude you again! The Duke sweetly explains that he may be busy, but Sheriel will always come first. They will go on the boating trip together. Suddenly, an argument starts between father and son. Each one wants to sit beside her in the carriage. Sheriel is fed up with their childish fight, so she sternly sends them away. The two are shocked that the Duchess would kick them out. Sheriel then reprimands Kian for being childish enough to fight with his son, and Cardel for disrespecting his dad like that. Little Cardel is the first to admit that he's wrong, promising that it won't be like that from then on. So he begs her not to kick him out of her office. With a mischievous smile, Sheriel assures him that she will not kick him out. She explains that they will go on to have a nice stroll together, just the two of them. They will have to walk hand in hand. The two are shocked and instantly protest that the punishment is extreme, but Sheriel is not having it. She tells Daisy to guide the two outside. Soon enough, the two are awkwardly standing side by side. Suddenly, the Duke reaches down to carry the child, telling him that he should just hold on tight because they're already in this situation. Cardel agrees, saying that he's only doing this for his mom. As they traverse the corridors, the maids and servants are amazed to see the Duke and his heir together. They keep on murmuring, for it is rare to see the two together. Cardel begins blaming his father for this, but Kian argues that this all happened because Cardel lied. But realizing that Sheriel is right to be upset with him, Kian finally admits that he is wrong. Cardel is shocked to hear his dad apologizing, so he is quiet for a while. When he finally speaks, he declares that he still likes his mom more. Not willing to back down at all, Kian reminds his child that even though Sheriel likes Cardel more, she is still his wife. Daisy can only laugh at their childish squabble in the background. When they return to Sheriel's office, they see that the lady has fallen asleep at her desk. The Duke moves to personally carry her to the bedroom. He then notes that the Duchess is surprisingly light, so Daisy mentions that the lady has indeed lost a lot of weight recently, which is making her worry. She then suggests that the Duke share a meal with the Duchess. The maid even shares how the Duchess has been worried if the Duke has been taking proper meals as well. Kian is so touched that his wife is worried about him. Daisy shares that the lady has asked her to keep this a secret, but it seems like she's made a mistake. It is obvious that she revealed this on purpose based on how she's constantly giggling. Kian's face at this point is like a tomato, happy to hear that the Duchess has been thinking about him. Cardel then asks his dad to take him with him to the Duchess's room. He wants to be by her side as well. Knowing that his son will still do as he likes even if he tells him to go back to his room, the Duke indulges him. When the lady has been laid on the bed, father and son admire how beautiful the Duchess is. Cardel even mentions that his mom is kind to the servants. They continue to compliment the sleeping Sheriel, stating how angelic her voice is and how enchanting her smile is. Turns out, Sheriel is actually hearing all of this and she is too embarrassed to open her eyes. She pretends to be asleep, but then she notices that it has suddenly grown quiet, so she takes a look. She is surprised to see that her husband and son are staring at her. Sheriel tries to play it off, but Cardel calls her out for lying. She then asks him if they have finally become friends after all that bickering a while ago. They reason that it is because she wished for them to get along, so they are obliging her. Sheriel then tells him how embarrassed she was due to all their compliments earlier, but Cardel suddenly hugs her, telling her how nice she is not to be given praise. The boy then tells his mom to rest and asks if he can sleep with her. Naturally, Sheriel is more than willing, so Cardel is bragging once again. He declares that his dad is probably busy now, but Sheriel is quick to remind him not to keep his father away. Cardel reasons that it's because he likes his mom more and that he wishes that Sheriel would tell him that she loves him the most. Sheriel instantly squeezes him in a hug. The Duke, on the other hand, is feeling left out. He asks if he can stay with them as well. Cardel gives his permission because his mom wants them to get along, and so the family snuggles in the bed. They are so adorable. When Cardel falls asleep, husband and wife have a discussion. He tells her that lying affectionately in bed has been one of his dreams. Sometimes he feels like this situation is a punishment tormenting him. Sheriel assures him that with their lovely Cardel with them, there is nothing to be uneasy about. Later on, the Duchess and Cardel visit the Duke in his office to discuss the boating trip. They agreed to have the trip next week. Kian assures her that he'll do the preparations for them. Sheriel smiles brightly and thanks him. She realizes that the Duke is looking forward to it as well. A few days later, they are about to go on their trip. Kian is amazed at how beautiful the lady is while wearing that stunning dress. Blushing, he tells her to use sun protection later on. He even suggests that he'll do it later for her. They are off, and Cardel is pretty excited based on how he is focused on the window. The Duke, like the gentleman that he is, offers his hand to help Sheriel get down. But Cardel, always out to mess with his dad, takes his hand and acts like a lady while coming down. Sheriel is giggling as she explains that their son is probably jealous. Kian carries Cardel in his arms, and as expected, the boy protests. But Kian explains that he'll get tired easily from the walk to the lake, and he won't be able to enjoy it once they arrive. When they arrive, mother and son are amazed by the beautiful view. Kian recalls a promise that Sheriel made in the past. She said that she wanted to come to that lake with him someday. The Duke tells Sheriel that she finally kept her promise. And that's it for today, guys. What did you think? As always, don't forget to like the video and comment for the next part so we know you want more. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for updates. See you in the next one!